Macrina was from a famous family, most of whom, over generations, were celebrated theologians, teachers, and servants of God, many of them eventually canonized as saints. The most well-known of this family are Macrina and her younger brothers Basil the Great and Gregory of Nyssa. Macrina was a religious, living a consecrated life of asceticism, devoted to prayer and study. She was honored in Caesarea as a teacher, a healer, and the founder of a convent in which all the women, regardless of class origin, lived as equals. Most of what we know about Macrina comes from her brother Gregory, the Bishop of Nyssa, who wrote a short biography of his sister and a slightly longer book called Dialogue on the Soul and the Resurrection. That dialogue occurred shortly after the death of Basil. Gregory writes, "Basil, great among the saints, had departed from this life to God, and the impulse to mourn him was shared by all the churches. But his sister, the teacher, was still living, and so I journeyed to her, yearning for an interchange of sympathy over the loss of our brother. My soul was right sorrow-stricken by this grievous blow, and I sought for one who could feel it equally, to mingle my tears with. But when we were in each other's presence, the sight of the teacher awakened all my pain, for she too was lying in a state of prostration, even unto death. Imagine seeking out your sibling to commiserate over the death of another sibling, only to find that she is dying too." As their conversation begins, Gregory reveals that he is experiencing what so many of us have experienced, that it can be hard to hold on to our theology, our faith and hope in the resurrection, in the face of the death of someone we love. Macrina briefly indulges him in his grief, his notion that Basil is dead and gone forever. But then she moves to correct him, and not always gently. She assures him that the soul persists after the body's decomposition, that it is what connects us to God's love, and that all beings, good or evil, will someday be assimilated to the divine nature, as she puts it. Basil and anyone we love are never truly gone from us. The dialogue is modeled after those in Greek philosophy, but something that strikes me about it is its depiction of their thoughtful discourse and relationship as siblings. In his Life of Macrina, Gregory writes condescendingly of her gender, even as he praises her wisdom. She does not have his education or authority as priest, and yet in the dialogue, he recognizes and always defers to her autodidactic knowledge and God-given wisdom, and he calls her the teacher. The Life of Macrina might just as well be titled The Life and Death of Macrina, for nearly half the book deals, very movingly, with her final days and hours and the days after her death. Gregory is tasked with preparing Macrina's body for burial, with the help of the women in her convent. When the sisters burst into wailing and tears, it is Gregory who reminds them of Macrina's teaching on the soul and the resurrection. He has learned and can now teach the teacher's lesson. "I sought wisdom openly in my prayer," says our reading from Ecclesiasticus. "Before the temple I asked for her. I inclined my ear a little and received her, and I found for myself much instruction. I made progress in her, To her who gives wisdom, I will give glory. It occurs to me that Gregory could have taken Macrina's theology and presented it as his own. It was the 4th century. Macrina was a woman and a layperson, and as Shakespeare's Rosalind would put it, it is not the fashion to give the lady the epilogue. But he gave glory to the human from whom he heard this wisdom, and the God who gave it to her. What we read in the dialogue is a brother who listens carefully and thoughtfully to his sibling and learns from her wisdom. Here are my mother and my siblings. My brothers, there is wisdom all around us. Wisdom God has given to our siblings in the world. Part of our work as brothers is to listen and learn. When I made my first profession of vows 6 years ago, I was told that while I had completed my formal formation in this community, as a friar and as a Christian, my education would never be finished. And now I find myself at the side of dying people, listening to their wisdom, listening to their hopes and fears. I know you all are doing the same in your communities, listening to your fellow parishioners, your co-workers, people living on the streets in your cities, people living and dying wherever you are. This is what brothers do. May we never stop listening, learning, and passing on what we have learned.